everyone, and welcome to today's My Games Recruitment Show, where I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about how to use podcasts to win high value clients. And we have a guest on today who's won several retained deals from a podcast that's only been running for 3 months. So, Mike, can you just, I've been waiting for this for ages. This is my dream guest today, my dream topic.
Do you want me to leave?
I would like that, yeah. Actually,
yeah,
I would like
I thought so, yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, the thing is, the way that the market is right now, I think it's really hard to set yourself apart, to make yourself look different, genuinely different in the eyes of your clients and prospective clients. I think it's hard to get your personality across because that's what people buy, as well as your ability. They want to buy the kind of person you are. And I think it's really hard to start conversations with high value prospects who probably feel that they don't need you in their lives. And a podcast will tick all three of those boxes. Okay, so, and I don't think they get used enough. I think people believe there's something that they're not. They think they're much harder. They think that they wouldn't be able to do it. No. Well, if that's what you think, you're wrong. Can I say that, Kirst?
I mean, you just did. So
yeah, you're wrong. No. And so we've invited Natasha on the show today because she started a podcast only 3 months ago, having started her business 3 months before that. So no experience of any of this at all. And she's reaping lots and lots of really benefits. She told us something off air, which sadly we can't repeat, which is quite a big deal for her, which has stemmed from the podcast as well. So it's all systems go. So we're really pleased to have Tash on the show with us today.
And here she is. Hi, Tash.
Hi, hey, how are you?
Good, thank you. Glad to have you here, mostly because we're just really excited about that. I'm overexcited. I need to calm myself down. I'm sorry.
Now, I'm going to ask you to just say a few words in a second, Natasha. But first, it's right to say that you're the CEO or MD of your founder of your own business, which is only 6 months old, been in recruitment for the thick end of a decade, and currently you're a search business and you service really senior hires in specialty chemical sector.
Yep.
But could you give us a feeling of how you got to where you are now? Just to share with us your journey, if you can, to start off with.
Yeah, sure. My journey into recruitment was not linear, let's put it that way. I started life nursing, went to university, studied that, dropped out. 12 weeks before qualifying, decided that wasn't for me. Worked in social care for years after that. And then I was just really kind of disheartened with the process and thought, I quite fancy a sales gig. And that was as far as it went, really. I went through a graduate recruitment program and ended up working within the sector that I now recruit for. So I worked within that space for 3 or 4 years. I was managing a commercial team, global accounts, etc. Between roles there, I was approached by a high street recruiter and kind of standard process. Oh, although you could be good for this job, what do you think about recruitment? And so on. I've never really considered it. Went through the process, decided it wasn't for me for various reasons, and then I was headhunted by a boutique search firm, and I had a really good experience with the process. And I had a screening call. The role wasn't right for me, again, for various reasons. But it prompted me to say, well, I considered recruitment in the past. Basically, have you got any jobs? And you were like, oh, I don't know. Actually, I was on the phone to a researcher. And then 6 weeks later, that was that. And 9-10 years later, still here, and I just set my own business up.
What prompted you to go on your own, sort of in this market particular? I'm just interested to cover that off with you.
It was an itch to scratch. I had a really good experience with both businesses that I worked for. But the next natural step would have been to do it for myself. And the industry that I work in is so specialized, whether that is, and it's so complex, whether it's culturally, technically, commercially. I wanted a business that purely focused in this space, because often in the chemicals market, it sits alongside other industry verticals, which is what it had done kind of in the past. And I was paddling my own canoe. So I wanted to build something that was purely focused in this space.
Good. Okay.
And the feeling of doing something for yourself, that kind of I want to look back in 5 years, 10 years. Again, the jury's out. I've been going 6 months. I'm cautiously optimistic. Like, I don't want to run before I can walk, but I want to look back on something and go, well, I've done that. And the only way you can do it is if you do it yourself.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people in our audience will relate to that, I think.
Taking pride in what you do is a big motivator, I think. So,
Yeah.
well, good. Okay, well, thanks for that. So now we're going to dive straight into the contract world.
Yeah, the next obvious question. So you sort of shared with us how you got into recruitment. So I feel like the next obvious question, and to sort of lay a little bit of a foundation for the rest of this, is why did you then start a podcast and so soon after sort of starting your own business as well? So why did you go the podcast route?
Yeah, 90 days in, setting a business up, doing a full series 1 record and releasing the first episode was mental. Why did I do it? So it's something I've thought about for a couple of years, and I dallied around with the idea, and for various reasons just didn't progress it. But when I decided to set the business up, I thought, I'm going to do it. Worst case scenario, I can't get anyone to agree to it. Fine, nobody knows. We move on. Kind of middle ground, maybe I get 5-10 guests. I do 1 series, it sits there, it's evergreen. Great, that's content that I can reuse. Or it goes well and people actually want to kind of be involved and do it. And thankfully it's been the latter. I originally considered doing lives like this, but a really good friend of mine who's quite senior in PR for a big consumer brand said, don't do that. Mainly because of my interviewing skills, just because, again, new territory, I've never done anything like this before. The guests that I have on the show are also quite senior, and it would be difficult, I think, to get them to do a live. So it was actually suggested to me, why don't you relook at the podcast idea? So, okay, yeah, let's, see how it goes. And people have been really interested, both in terms of being a guest and listening to it.
Did you have the desire to be the next Joe Rogan, or just, no, I just want to kind of make a place in the market, my market, and make a name for myself in that space? Which one?
Yeah, it's the latter. I mean, I don't look at my numbers. I look at the majority of my audience sit on LinkedIn. So I look at my LinkedIn numbers, but I'm not hung up on what they are. I'm hung up on the increase every time an episode's released. Ultimately, I've had 7 come out. I actually took some advice from somebody that you've had on the show, Nitin Sharma, who's got the Rec podcast, and he said, if you stood, on Manchester, on the high street in Manchester, and started talking about the chemical space, how many people would stop and listen? Probably 0. Whereas if you do that in a podcast format and 10 people listen, it's 10 people that you wouldn't have had listened to you previously. So, and then anything on top of that's a bonus.
I think that's an interesting point, actually, just to dig down on it, because we often get this when we talk about podcasts with people. They're usually very reticent to start off with, which is the point of doing this show, is to demystify it a little bit. But I think they struggle to see sometimes the value of it. And the way you've just described it there is perfect. If you could just get 50 people in a room, just 50, and they listen to you, they get to know a little bit about you, they start to get a little bit of confidence in the way in which you see the world. It's broken the ice. Get 3 or 4 of those instances, and they might even take a call or reply to an email because they get to know you a little bit. It's got a name. It's called the mere exposure effect. Actually, it's a thing. So would you do it? Well, if it didn't cost any money, yeah, I would really. So there you are. That's the point in having a podcast, I think.
Yeah, and I think you can measure that. You measure the response by the people that you speak to. There's a couple of examples that I can give with you where, every conversation I have, I just make a little note of who mentions the podcast. I don't bring it up. I just see whether anybody mentions it. Probably 1 in 3 people that I speak to, and as recruiters, you're speaking to so many people. I'm making a tally. It feels like loads of people have seen it, and the reality is they've probably not listened to the full episode. They've probably seen the clips. But then that's enough, isn't it? That then maybe there'll be one particular guest that resonates that they want to listen to or whatever. I can also gauge it by candidate interest as well. So I had a really interesting guest, episode 5 or 6, I think it was. And I had over 500 messages about this podcast asking to be introduced to that person as a candidate. Now, obviously, there's varying levels of, how appropriate somebody is to be introduced to that person. But the point is nearly 500 people have reached out to me. Well, and that's the people that bothered. So I'm like, okay.
Well, I picked up a client. I picked up a client a couple of weeks back, and I always say, how did you hear about us and what have you? And he said, I've been following your stuff for 2 years. I watch every single show that you do. Now, interestingly, I went back and I couldn't find his name on any of them. So he's picking this show up just by going to the LinkedIn page and watching it. If you're watching it now, I hope you're enjoying it, and I'll see you very soon. But you are. But and that's not unusual. It's not unusual to do that. So I think because it doesn't cost any money, and because hardly any, just a few pounds here.
It's really low investment. Yeah,
it's tiny because it doesn't cost much time, and we'll talk about that in a moment with you. I know, and the benefits, as you said, you use the word evergreen, which I really love because once it's there forever.
Yeah.
And I had someone, in fact, this is something else I forgot to mention to you, Kirsty. I had someone comment on one of our shows that was over 2 years old. So he'd come across it, watched it, really liked it, and sent me a message. It's there forever, right? And I think that, especially if you've got a niche, as you have, you don't have to, but if you've got a niche, it's madness not to consider some kind of show that's put out there to really engage and talk to that audience. It's brilliant, I think.
We've had some really good comments, actually. So Graham said this. He creates microscience for some of his podcasts. One has over 80,000 hits a year, which is, I think, really good going. Really good going. And then Emma here has said, being a copywriter, I'm a huge fan of written content, but honestly, podcasts are one of the best ways to speed up the trust factor, which I do like. I do like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think most people who are watching this like the idea of a podcast, if nothing else. So what I want to talk to you now, Tash, is about setting it up, because I know a lot of people think it's a really complicated thing. A lot of people think it costs a lot of money, or you have to have lots of specialized equipment. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll be honest. That was the one thing that I spent, for want of a better term, faffing about with. I'm somebody who likes to do my research. I like a plan. I like to have I know what I'm doing. And in something like this, I was totally out of my comfort zone. And I took some advice from, like I say, knitting, and actually Alicia Holmes, who's got Key Recruitment. She's got the Recruitment podcast. And I was just like, the actual doing the episodes and speaking to people, no problem, do that every day. But and not even necessarily the kit, but getting it out there and the editing, I was worried about, because I didn't want it to look like half an effort. I wanted it to look good. My branding is really important to me. But the reality is, it is really straightforward. I use Riverside to do the actual recording, which then you've got your sound and your video integrated. It automatically populates your captions, of which you do have to go through, especially a lot of my guests aren't native English speakers. So it doesn't, some of the subtitles, the captions are a bit funny. And obviously I publish through Spotify Creators, which pushes it to all the podcast outlets, and then I just upload it onto YouTube. So it is pretty straightforward. I've got a mic, a laptop, and I've got a ring light, just because the lighting is probably more important than the actual camera quality.
Mm-hmm. Definitely agree on that one. So realistically, it doesn't take tons. I mean, to get a mic and a ring light, you can get less than £100, both of them.
For sure.
Yeah. And then, like you say, Riverside is one. We use StreamYard, which is something that's very similar again. And they are designed to be quite intuitive, aren't they? They're designed to be almost idiot proof. If I can do it, then anybody can do it.
Yeah. And that's how I felt about it. And I took a little bit of advice about, because again, I really care what it looks like. So I took a bit of advice about, the episode covers and things like that. And I did get some design work done so that the branding looks nice alongside the business, because that was important to me. So that was probably the main cost, was actually the branding. So the logo, the episode covers, and bits and pieces. You told
us as well that you had a slight technical problem on one of them with the sound or something, and you got that sorted for a few pounds off Fiverr, didn't you, as I recall?
Yeah, I took some advice. I used an editor that one of the people that I mentioned uses, and he did me a quick turnaround on something, because I was having Yeah, a nightmare with sound, and the guest comms teams wasn't happy. So we did that. We did it on a quick turnaround, and yeah, it was easy.
So
50 quid.
if you get technical problems, you can get someone in for a few pounds just to sort it out, and away you go. So
and the reality is, Riverside is so good that you can alter it yourself. So unless you've got really bad dropouts where you need someone to really play with the audio, you can fix the audio yourself. Generally speaking, like I say, it's one episode where I needed some support.
Yeah, I think like 90% of the time, if you can do it yourself, and then if you have to pay, like you say, like 40 or 50 quid every now and again for one person to sort out problems that you can't, the investment is minimal when you consider the impacts that you talked about earlier. The investment is minimal.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a time investment, and I do spend a fair bit of time, and I do that outside of my working day. So, but that's the story of being a new business, right? Long term, would I love this in a couple of years to still be going to be consistent and to just be able to outsource that to an editor and scale it up? Yeah, I'd love to, but for where it is at the moment, it's perfect as is.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So now we are going to move on to sort of more things around the podcast. But before we do that, I want to talk about getting guests, because again, this is a thing that I think a lot of people are nervous about. You want decent names, but you also want to be comfortable when you're speaking to them. You want to, like you say, some of the people you're speaking to are really, high up level people. So what is it that you do that gets them to agree to come on the show?
Yeah. Now versus like earlier on, it's obviously a bit different because I've got a track record now. There's two schools of thought. You can either go with people that you're really comfortable with, that you know really well, or you can write a list of who you dream. I wrote a list of 20 people I would love to have on the podcast. None of those, I would say 70% of them were not in my comfort zone, and I didn't know them personally. So you either decide to do that, or you go kind of the easier route. I went for the harder route, and I just decided who I wanted on the podcast, who I'd love to speak to, and then take it from there. And I had one chap, I just reached out on LinkedIn, explained that I'd just set a business up, that I was thinking about not thinking, I'm going to be doing a podcast, but it doesn't exist yet. Would you give me 10 minutes of your time to talk about it? Quite a few people just ignored me or said no. I had one guy who is the CEO of a $15 billion company say, well, he actually said, I don't think I'd be very interesting for your podcast. I was like, well, I disagree, and here are the reasons why I disagree with you.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, you've got 10 minutes. And we had a chat, and I was just really honest. I said, look, I am asking more of you than what I can currently give. This podcast doesn't exist. I set my business up 3 weeks ago. This is all really new. I want to put interesting conversations out into the marketplace. I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's also a really good marketing exercise for a brand new business. Will you do it, please? And he was like, yeah, fair play. You've been quite ballsy in, being set up for 3 weeks, and here you go. And then once I'd had prior agreement to another really senior person of a similar kind of level, similar size business who I've known for a really long time. So once I'd got a couple of big names, it all then started to be a little bit easier. Yeah. And what I've actually found is going through communications teams rather than the people directly is a much easier route. Senior people don't always check their emails and the LinkedIn profiles.
Very true. Very true. That's so interesting to me, that because normally you get those kind of teams are more of a blocker, but I suppose in this way it's a flattered to be asked to be on them, and they get to promote their thoughts and their things on the industry.
I cannot tell you. So I've never recruited in comms. It's never been a discipline that I've ever been involved in. The communication teams in those businesses, and some of them are really big businesses, are unbelievable. They are so supportive. They obviously want to make an assessment to find out whether it's the right thing for them, as I do, because it's not always a given. You might meet somebody and go, actually, this just isn't a fit for the tone or whatever. But they're so good in making it happen, getting all the diaries aligned, all of the prep, which we'll talk about in a minute, and getting people to agree. There's two people that I can think of off the top of my head that I contacted 3 or 4 times. I'm talking email, LinkedIn, phone, no response. Spoke to the comms team, and I had an immediate accept.
Speak to the right people, get it done. I would just say this on that point that you made earlier, which I think is very important. The first guest that you have, a lot of it comes down to confidence, personal confidence. You're obviously a very confident person, regardless of how you felt at the time. Natural confidence to go through, and that's fine. If you aren't like that, my advice would be very strongly to just start to get some guests on who are going to add value, but they're not your big name guests, because what you don't want to do is mess up your big name guests. You know, someone just made a comment about making sure you can host properly, and I think that does. There you go, Graham there. Thank you, Graham. So I think that you do need to understand the rules around hosting, the questions to ask, how to deal with timings and the sort of stuff that goes with that. But I'll tell you one thing, because we do this for a lot of our clients in the United Kingdom and the United States. And it's when you get a big name that unlocks the doors to other big names. It's almost like, well, who's been on it then? Okay.
Yeah.
Whereas who's been on it? Oh my goodness, so-and-so's been on it. Yeah. Oh, well, in that case, I'll come on it as well. So, but I think it's okay to be patient, to just get your skills to the level that when you get the big name so-and-so on there, it's a bloody good interview. That's what you need. And then the gates open from there on in.
And I think the way, you know, again, from that comment, that was something I was really conscious about, because I had no experience. Obviously, as a recruiter, you're used to interviewing people, but it's very different interviewing somebody for a job where you've got an agenda. They know you've got an agenda, and you know, you're going through a system. An interview, you're going through a systematic process, whereas an interview on a podcast is conversational, but you need to keep people on track, etc. That's why the podcast is good, first of all, because everyone can go off tangent. If they say something you don't, you know, it doesn't land right, either of you. The amount of times that I've fluffed it when we've done the intro or whatever, you know, you stop, you re-record. But again, because the people that I've got on the podcast are relatively senior or extremely senior, all the questions are pre-prepped. I always ask the guests what they want to talk about, not necessarily what I want to talk about. Sometimes I have an idea, or this is the reason I contacted you. I think that's really interesting. But then as you're doing the prep with them, you're like, well, actually, that's way more interesting than what I thought. So let's go with that, you know, and also what they want to get out of doing it, because there's got to be a motivation, whether that's leaving the market with a particular thought or message, whether it's, you know, I've had people say that they want to attract more mid-level talent. So they want to talk around, you know, getting their face out is not a bad thing versus, you know, people that wanted to really push around sustainability, or they feel really passionately about a certain topic. So it's very much driven by the guest, and that does make it easier if you don't have the experience like I did, because I was very much put on a track. And you can disagree, and you can, you know, hash it out in terms of what you want it to look like. But
we find the questioning and timing that you mentioned quite important. Ours is a live show, and we have to finish pretty much smack on the time. We haven't got.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you in a bit, Mike.
So we have a framework which obviously you went through with us, and then Kirsty's got the timings, and she keeps us going. Like now, she'll be. I can tell her little face now. She wants us to move on because we're burning into time. But I think that the time we just throw this show together. I think the timing helps your confidence as well. If you're well structured, well timed, you just feel this is going to go okay. You've got your backbone, and then you can go off the backbone and come back again, provided you stick to that structure. You're absolutely fine. And the other thing, don't forget, is that if you don't have time to talk about something you want to talk about, then the audience will never know. Because it's not like you said, and now we're going to talk about this. Oh, we haven't got time. You just don't talk about it. It's fine. Yeah. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I am going to come to you a little bit about, I just want to delve a little bit deeper on the topics and how they kind of come about. I know you touched on them there. But before then, Mike, it is time for a message from our sponsor, which does remain us. We are still our own sponsor.
Yeah. And can we have a few questions then? Because a few things have come in.
We are. I'm going to. That's why I was rushing you. Yeah.
Okay. All right then. So it's okay. So Kirsty's for some time now has been teaching people how to launch live shows and podcasts. We've been doing it as part of our consultancy. We've actually put this together into a course now. So let me just run you through it. It is a course specifically aimed at building a podcast to start conversations with high value prospects, not to make you the next Joe Rogan. You need to go somewhere else for that. This is a sales tool, not a marketing. Well, this is marketing, I suppose, but it's there to do that it says on the screen. So essentially, we're going to show you how to find and invite high value guests, including email scripts that you would use and a whole bunch of other things to make that whole process easier. The structure of the show is going to go into a lot more detail in what we just covered in this, a lot more depth as to how to do that. Technical setup, as Tash already said, not as bad as you might think, really. So it's not a big part of the course. We're also going to show you how to flip the conversation from one which is about value, come on my show and be interviewed, to a conversation which is going to lead to a deal at some point. I'm going to show you how to do that. Also, give you reasons why an audience isn't necessarily a priority for your show. It doesn't really matter so much in terms of achieving what it's supposed to achieve. And it's made up of a series of live webinars, some video content, and as much email support as you want. Now, in terms of pricing, because it's new, we will be charging $597 for this, and that's a steal. Just make one placement from this and you get like 8 to 10 times your return on investment. So more than that, perhaps. We're going to do an offer price, 2 conditions. Condition number 1 is that you give us feedback on the course so that we can improve it. Condition number 2 is if you're thrilled by it, and only if you're thrilled by it, you give us a testimonial. That's all. That's all we want. And that's worth 200 quid, just those 2 things. Now, if you're interested to know more, I think the cohort is due to start in April. So if you're interested to know more, you can just email podcast to mike@flair.co.uk. That's absolutely fine. Or you can DM me on LinkedIn, just podcast. If you want to leave a comment, as put podcast in the comments, then again, very happy to do that. But I know people don't really like doing that as much. So email me and DM me, it's perfectly fine. And then I can send out the 1-pager for you in the next few days. So back to you then, Kirsty.
Perfect. Okay, so Tash, we have had a couple of questions that I kind of want to run through. Yep. So first one, Michael has asked, how do you manage getting candidates to still go direct to you if they find out about the client via the podcast? So I guess this is, how do you maintain, they still come to you without kind of cutting you out and going straight to the end client?
Well, we're not talking about roles on the podcast. This is an interview that's talking about, their background, how they got into the industry, etc. So the candidate would know that person and that client exists anyway. It's just in the same way that if they did any other media, it wouldn't stop them kind of going and contacting that person directly. So I kind of don't really kind of consider that or think about it too much because, like I say, we're not talking about an active role. Obviously, if I was recruiting for, let's say, a sales director role, we wouldn't be discussing that on the podcast. Yeah. I actually stay away from recruitment, hiring, talking about my services. Naturally, talent comes into it. I'm speaking to leaders in my sector, so that obviously comes up. But seldom will they say, yeah, we're actively hiring for these jobs.
Yeah. And also, it wouldn't be as evergreen then if they do that, because obviously that's going to go swiftly out of things. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So I mean, we have had some people. Sorry.
What I was going to say was something that we spoke about in the prep for this. Part of the barometer is how well I think an episode's landed with how many people contact me. There was one episode where hundreds of people contacted me asking for an introduction to that person. And that's hundreds of people that have not bothered to message them themselves.
Yeah, I assume as well, the bigger people, they're going to think, well, they're not going to answer to me on LinkedIn and you're almost a route in, I guess. Yeah. They're going to think of you as a facilitator rather than an obstacle. So I think that's probably going to be more likely. Thank you very much. Now, we have had one question, which I feel kind of cheeky bringing up because it's actually directed at me and I do apologize. Julia said, what about LinkedIn Lives? Are they in essence a podcast? Now, the answer to this is a little complicated. Yes and no. So yes, in that you can do something like we do if you already have a LinkedIn Live where you just strip the audio off and put it on a podcast. It makes it very, very easy. There's no editing really to be done on it, or minimal editing if you want to, and you can do it. But like Tash said, there is a difference in, for some people won't do a LinkedIn Live that would do a podcast. Sometimes if you're looking for something that's a little bit more polished, we like the sort of rough edges of a LinkedIn Live. I think it shows a lot of personality and a lot of, but that doesn't necessarily work for all industries, I guess. And so if you want to have a more polished element, then a podcast is probably going to be something that a lot of people feel more comfortable with. So it's a bit of both. We have also had a lot of people ask about technical stuff, and I will mention them at the end. I'll put them in the comments at the end. So that
before you do that as well, just very quickly, Kirsty, if I can just interrupt. One other thing which we always talk about with the podcast, you don't really know who your audience is. That's probably the biggest difference. The podcast, you don't. With a live stream, you know some of your audience because some people say they want to attend. They get a notification. So we kind of know some of the people who've opted on that subject. And that's really important in certain cases. If you run a podcast and you want to know who your audience is, my advice is every now and again is to do a webinar. Because for a webinar, you've got to register. You've got to put down your name and your email address to get to the webinar. So if you want, same goes for you, Tash, actually, but if you ever wanted to kind of really understand who's buying into this, run a webinar, promote it on your podcast, and then you can see a lot more detail around the people who are engaging with you. Because I think for certain types of people, that's the main reason. That's why we don't do a podcast and we do a live show.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Right. So I'm aware of timings, so I'm just going to swiftly move on. So a couple of things very quickly. I know you touched on this, Tash, but I want to just put it out separately is how do you discover the content, the topics that you talk about? I know that you said sometimes it's guest led, but you talk about their journey. Can you just talk a little bit more about how you determine the topic?
Yeah. So it's always guest led. I can give my 2 pence or ideas because sometimes, but people are generally quite passionate about something, but the general format is, because I work in the chemical industry, it's a very technical environment. What I didn't want it to be was a technical conversation, because that, first of all, that's not something that I'm capable of doing. And 2, I wanted something that was more personal, because that doesn't exist on the other podcasts that are available in the sector. So the episodes are somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes, nice length, I think. But the general format is talking about them, talking about their background, how they came into the industry, because everyone's got a different story, which is really interesting. Then whatever they want to get out of the podcast or what the topic is, we kind of weave that into the questions in the middle. And I also like to talk around things like lessons learned and, learning from other people's mistakes. So actually, I ask quite a lot of the guests who come on. I ask them to talk about things that have gone wrong, which the people that do more of that, the episode responses are a lot better. So people are definitely interested in the human element rather than here's what we think about the market, although it would be remiss not to talk about it. It is more about the person, but that's the format of my podcast. It would be different for other people.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Because I know that is something that we see often. People think they have to reinvent the wheel every single time, but it's not. You can have the same sort of structure, just make it a little bit different, I guess. So thank you for that. Okay. I want to talk a little bit now, just quickly about the process. So you've spoken to somebody, you talked a little bit about how you get them to agree, but say you've spoken to someone on LinkedIn, they've said, Tash, 100% like the idea of it. What happens then? How do you get from then to a piece of content?
Yeah, so I have a discovery call with that person, which is where we agree what we're going to talk about. But I also have a pre-prepared list of questions that I have that helps me pull some information out about that person. So how they came into the industry, etc. There's about 40 questions that I just kind of run a few off to open people up, because people say interesting things in that bit, and then we decide how much we do or don't use. And then we agree where we can't talk about, what we can talk about. And then from that, I can then pull the transcript, go through it, prepare the questions. In that discovery call, often if it's a larger company, communications are involved in that, because they'll have thoughts and exactly how they want that to be managed. So once we've done that, I then go ahead and prep the questions for the recording. I do it with plenty of time. We're talking like, sometimes you have to do it a week before, which isn't ideal, but I like to do it at least 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks before the recording if I can, just because then if we've got any back and forth with questions, that's that. Then we book in the recording. We then run through that, do that. I then pull together the edit of the full episode. But for every episode, I get like 10 pieces of content. So you've got the full episode, short clips, long clips. I do like a carousel of quotes that I've called leadership lessons for season 1, TBC, what it's going to be for season 2. I also write a written version on LinkedIn. So that comes out every fortnight, a week after each recording goes live. So they get all
is that a newslettery type thing? Is that sort of a newsletter? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that goes out on LinkedIn a week after. So I've got like a calendar schedule of like, all my episodes go out on a Tuesday, but like the Friday before I get a clip that goes out, etc. So I've got a running order. Once I've pulled all that together, I share all the clips, all the copy, all the transcripts on Dropbox with the guest, and then said client, then I'm in recruiter mode, with the guest and the comms teams if relevant. And I also emailed them with a calendar of where it's going, what day, what platform, and kind of my expectations around interaction. So that's kind of that's a whistle stop tour to the process.
That's really good. So you basically built a piece of content, you put it out there and publicize it, and then it's on to the next, like a TV show, really, I guess.
Yeah. So each episode has got a 2-week run on my LinkedIn, on the podcast LinkedIn. So for 2 weeks, all of the content is focused around that one guest. The final piece of content for them goes out on a Thursday, and then on the Friday, it's the new clip for the following Tuesday for the next guest.
So like teaser almost,
Okay.
teaser clip.
Yeah.
Just asking, if you feel uncomfortable, take the fifth on this, or you don't know, again, it's fine to say, but kind of, have you got any numbers on number of kind of views or impressions that you might get on all this content? Again, don't say if you don't want to. You know.
No, it's fine. I don't really focus on the YouTube numbers or the Spotify numbers, because ultimately my main audience sits on LinkedIn.
Yeah, we're the same.
So I get around somewhere between 20 and 25,000 impressions a week on the content, and that's incrementally gone up from episode 1 to episode 7. I'm running 10 episodes in a season, so I've still got a few more to be released before season 2 starts, which I'm starting recording next week with plenty of time, even though they don't go out till April. So yeah, the numbers are like, I'm really pleased with them. So I think the compounding effect, it's going up incrementally. Like, I've got nearly 2,000 subscribers on the digest, which is the written newsletter, and I've also got I put out a monthly newsletter from Kellen Partners, my business, of which then I feature the podcast and I put links to the episodes and clips and things like that. So it's all kind of an ecosystem really that sort of feeds it. And what
feed each other.
Yeah, and what has helped is some companies are happy to post. Most people are happy to reshare it from the company pages, but if they're willing to post it natively, and obviously they always tag me in the podcast, I don't get those numbers, so I don't get to see that. But when they do post it, I do see an incremental spike.
Okay. Could you be happy to share the links with us, and Kirsty will put them in the comments?
Yeah, I'll share the LinkedIn and the.
Want to go and see your stuff? They can have a look at it and kind of weigh up how it is. Just on that as well, just a quick question, and we have hinted a few times at this before. In the promos for this show, which I wrote and LinkedIn posts. What kind of benefits 3 months in of running your podcast? What kind of tangible or intangible benefits are you getting from this podcast?
So like I mentioned before, I had a list of 20 people who am I absolutely definitely want them on the list, on the podcast, who I've never spoken to before, by the way. They just, whether they've seen emails, seen my LinkedIn profile, like you do as recruiters trying to contact people. I've now recorded with 5 of those 20, with some more in the pipeline, or they're agreed to be recorded for season 2. I've had face-to-face meetings with a couple of those people on their sites to talk about search. I've had a couple of retained pieces of work off the back of the podcast as well, because obviously we're spending a lot of time together. You're spending maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes talking, sharing the format of the podcast and whether they want to agree to it. Then you're doing the discovery call. Then you're doing the actual recording. And in between, we always have a bit of a chat before to both of us loosen up, bit of a chat at the end. So naturally, they get to understand your questioning and your thought process and everything else. So and also you get to learn things about people that you wouldn't just ordinarily ask because it's so personal. So I think as a result, you're creating that relationship and trust that you wouldn't have ordinarily had. And I genuinely believe 90% of the people that have been on this podcast who I didn't know before wouldn't have had a phone call with me had it have not been for the podcast.
Especially since, you've got a reputation in the industry, but your business hasn't because it's so new.
Yeah.
The chances of getting in front of those people from a 6-month-old business was like 0, I would think.
Yeah. Minus.
So this has been fantastic for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been brilliant. And when people say, people who I really respect in the industry dropping me a message and going, hey, really rate what you're doing. What a compliment that is. You know, when you just, even if nothing comes from it, you know, how great is that? And, you know, people obviously, I've not had any situation where people have gone out of the way to say like bad things, you know, so that's, you know, it's not that sort of environment, is it? But loads of people just reaching out and saying, you know, you've done a good job. I've had a couple of inbound inquiries for work, which I'm now kind of progressing and having those conversations. That's aside from the couple of retainers. So I think as this continues to gain a bit of momentum, I think it will end up being a really big source of my kind of new business generation, which wasn't necessarily the reason why I set it up. I always knew it would be a good idea to be in front of people who ordinarily wouldn't speak to me, but I didn't necessarily anticipate like a direct correlation with that. And nor am I putting out the expectation of, if you come on the podcast, we're working together. That's not, you know, that's, I mean, that's not the gig.
I think we talked about this off air before we started, and I'm conscious we're running out of time, Kirst, but I'll just say this one last thing. I think the objective for the people that you speak to who potentially could be clients, the objective is to have that conversation with them. They can choose to have that conversation or they can choose to do business with you or not. But I think what sits behind everything that you do, I believe, has to be a desire to give value to the audience that you're communicating with, more than anything else, to give value to them, to take whatever this person knows that you're interviewing and communicate that so people can absorb it and do what they want with it. That's your primary concern, isn't it? And then to actually do business, if it works out, that's great, you know, secondary thing, but it really is about adding value. And
it's fun. Like there's also that, like, I actually really look forward to doing it. Season 1, if people were willing to do it, I was like, you let me know when you're available. 2 a.m, I'll do a recording. Like, that's where I was at. Whereas now season 2, I can be a little bit more organised and have, you know, set recording days because now I've got more momentum and people are more engaged with it. But like, I proactively look forward to doing those recordings and even doing the edit. It is a bit labour intensive, but it's worth it. And I enjoy it. And listening back to yourself 3 or 4 times on one episode is less fun, but it also helps you in terms of how you present yourself. I didn't realise how many ums and ahs or like precursor sentences, like I think before every sentence. That's a new thing that changed.
I often say, if that makes sense, and when you listen back now, all I can hear is, if that makes sense. It is painful, but once you get over that, fine.
Well, that makes sense, Kirst. That makes sense. A lot of sense.
I see what you did there, old man. I'll get you for that. Okay, all right. So unfortunately, guys, we are kind of coming towards the end of the show. So in a second, we're going to come to Tash and ask her for a top tip if you're thinking about doing the podcast, the thing that she thinks is the most important thing. But before then, Mike, can we talk about our next show, please?
Yes, it's just the 2 of us, and we're going to be talking about how you can set up a contract recruitment desk, because I think in this market, if you know that you're already going to make some money this month, regardless of what happens in your perm revenue streams, that's got to be an advantage. But it's not as easy as it might sound, and it is massively different to permanent recruitment. Those companies that treat permanent contract recruitment the same never really amount to vast amounts. You really do have to look at it differently. We're going to go into it in a lot of detail. Contract is my thing. Both my businesses were contract recruitment companies, so I know a lot about it, and I love it. So we're going to be talking about that at some length in a couple of weeks' time.
Amazing. Okay, so as I knew that you would, Natasha, you've gone through today and given so much insight and so many practical things for people to do and to take away and to implement. But at the end of the show, we like to give a top tip. So as all of the things that you've given us, if you could speak to somebody now who's thinking, I'm going to start a podcast, that's what I'm going to do. I just don't know what to do or what's the most important thing for me to do. What would you tell them?
Be organised. You end up, especially if you're releasing multiple episodes, I do mine fortnightly, you've got a lot of stuff going on, different conversations at different time points, and handling, for me, particularly senior people with lots of information. So just be organised.
Love that.
I think that's we found that too. I would echo that. It's not my top tip, but I'm just on the back of that because it's just a great top tip.
Piggybacking.
We use tick lists for ours because there's so many moving parts. None of them are very complicated, quite frankly. but you have to do them. Sometimes you have to do them in a certain order. So we're a tick list driven business. So I would echo that 100%.
Yeah, I think as well, as particularly if a lot of people are nervous with the earlier days ones, having a checklist, having things up there that can sort of say, no, I've got this under control, can just make you as a presenter, as a host, feel a lot better too. So thank you very much for that tip. And thank you very much for attending today. I knew that you'd be fantastic on the show. I was very excited about this episode. So I really, really appreciate you giving us your time today and all of your knowledge. So thank you very much, Tash, for being here today.
No, thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah, that's nice. And thank you.
Yeah,
and I want to say thank you to all the guests. We've had loads of comments today, so I will go through and make sure that if any questions that haven't been answered, we'll have an answer. So thank you very much for everybody who's watched and commented. We really appreciate that, and thank you for being with us. Anybody who's watching who's new, feel free to go and subscribe. We are on LinkedIn, YouTube, and on Spotify and Apple, I think. So depending on what your bag is, you can find us in various places. And of course, thank you to Mike for just being magnificent, really.
Well, I was very definitely in the back seat today and loving every minute of it. You girls did a really good job. And obviously, Kirsty, as always, as the hostess with the mostest, you were right there for us. So thank you. And thank you, Tash. That was everything I expected it to be and more. So brilliant. Thank you.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks.